Originally, I would kind of fly by these first two verses here in 1 Timothy chapter 5, because the next section is a pretty big section in chapter 5, talking about how to care for widows. And I was like, okay, yeah, we'll hit these two verses and get to the big chunk. And the more I looked at these two verses, let's just read it, 1 Timothy 5, 1 to 2. Don't rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and the younger women as sisters with all purity. And I thought, okay, yeah, we know that. Okay, go on. And let's jump into the widow section. But I just kept thinking about these verses because of how stories were coming to my mind of times these verses saved me from making huge mistakes in my life. And these four little instructions here that Paul gives to Timothy and he gives to us are things that we deal with really every day with all relationships we have, people who are older than you, people who are younger than you. And it hits these major points, and it's hit major points in life. So we're just going to camp out on these two verses today and kind of unpack this a little bit on this instructions that Paul gives on how to treat the people around us. So let's break this down a little bit. How do you treat people? Well, Paul says, and it's very simple. I mean, it's like not a complicated outline, right? He just says it, right? I stole his own words. Don't rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father. Don't rebuke an older man. Now, first of all, who's an older man? My definition has changed over the years. There was a time people my age were like older people. It's like, oh, there's old people, And now, like, I'm really young, and there's other older people out there. So you're going to have a different perspective. But if they're older than you, they're older, right? I mean, that's kind of how it works. So anybody older than you, someone you could consider older, whatever that age is for you, don't rebuke that older man, but exhort him as a father. Interesting here is that the Greek word that's used for rebuke is different than you might read it in other passages. Because you think of the word rebuke, and it's like, oh, maybe someone has a blind spot. You kind of pull them aside and say, hey, did you realize you're doing this? Like, maybe you got this sin going on, or this activity, this thing you're doing that maybe isn't appropriate, and it's kind of like a correction type of thing. The word used here is different than that. It actually is a very harsh term that means to strike at, like to hammer a blow at someone, right? And what Paul is saying here is to don't verbally assault someone who's older than you. Okay? When your goal is to cut them down and cause pain, don't do that. Back off from doing that. The Christian is not to intentionally, verbally cause pain in an older man, but to honor them as you would a good father who's worthy of respect. Now, if you notice, Paul does not qualify the instructions here. He's not saying, now, if the older man is worthy of respect, treat him appropriately. He says, if they're older, you treat them with respect. That's just how you do. Apparently, age alone makes someone worthy of respect in God's view. Honor people who are older than you. Respect them. Even if you disagree with them and they disagree strongly with what you're doing and they're telling you about it every day. You honor them even if you absolutely hate what they're doing and they absolutely hate what you're doing and they come at you to tell you that and try to cut you down. You honor them. Anyway, Christian, that's how you treat them in response. Honor them even if the only interaction you ever have with them is negative or combative. Now, you don't have to be best friends. You don't have to hang out with them every day. You don't have to whittle with them, on the front porch or anything like that. You don't even have to follow their advice on everything they say. But your attitude, your conversation must be respectful, not argumentative, not aggressive. That's a good thing to keep in the back of the minds because someday you're going to need it. When some older gentleman is attacking you for some reason, for whatever reason, My dad died in 1994. And a traumatic event, obviously. We're there in his room. We watched his last breath. It's a big moment and devastating, obviously, to the sons. The three of us boys were there. And he passes away, and I received a phone call a little later, a few hours later, from an older gentleman in our church, and said, sorry about your dad. How are you about that? And oh, thank you, and the whole thing. He says, well, there's a meeting tonight. You're going to be able to make it to that meeting, aren't you? And he's the chairman of the board at our church, and it was obviously very important to him that I come to this meeting, and I thought, well, I guess I got to go back and get funeral clothes and stuff. And we had left Danielle there. She was young, left her with some friends, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll come to this little meeting. Well, it turns out that the purpose of this meeting was to put the wheels in motion to get rid of me. He had a pattern he had every few years, which I learned later, that he would find a preacher. Then once they were there 3 or 4 years and they would start gaining some traction, he had to step in to make sure he's the guy who had the traction, right? So he would start poking at him and causing pressure and causing grief, and to the point when the preacher would lash back finally. And this guy was very distinguished man, had great respect in the congregation. So the people, all they would see is the preacher lashing back, and they'd be like, well, that guy's got to go, So, and it became real easy to fire people, and he did this over and over again. I didn't know this till later, but now it was my turn, and so I get to this meeting hours after my dad dies, and he starts just laying into me in this meeting. He's berating me in front of the other guys. He's calling me obstinate and destructive. He's accusing me of trying to intentionally destroy the church and everything they had built, him trying to destroy. But the issue was I was introducing small groups into the church, and everything should happen at the building. You don't take groups in people's homes because then we can't control what's being said and blah, 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 whatever, all the arguments that happened back in that era as people were introducing small groups. And every once in a while we had like a more modern song, and that was bad too. So anyway, he just didn't like me. He needed to get rid of me, and so he begins just demolishing me at this meeting. And as a young guy, I'm thinking of all the responses I could possibly have. I could obviously, there's just 100 things I could have said to battle him at that moment. And as he was verbally tearing me apart, attacking me at that moment, what kept going through my mind was this verse in Timothy, along with the other things that I wanted to say. I could easily have shamed him back because of his, the timing was awful. The timing was cruel, even evil, I would say. But it was obvious to me that the rest of the guys in the room saw that too. So I didn't need to say it. They already got that. Everybody knew what was happening. They were kind of like, dude, lay off. Do this next month. Really? You had to right now? Is this when you're going to do this? But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of this verse, 1 Timothy 5:1, when at that time I had memorized in the New International Version, which is a different flavor, says, do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. And in this meeting, my father has died now. And here's this older man that I'm supposed to treat as my father and respect him and honor him, even though he was not being respectful or honorable to me or my family at all. I decided I'm going to follow the Apostle Paul's advice and live accordingly. I decided not to engage him at the meeting. A few days later, after the funeral and things were starting to, go back to normal, but a week or so later, I pulled him aside or called him or something. I can't remember what I did. I said, hey, we obviously have some differences. I respect that. Can we get together and pray once a week and just pray for each other? I don't know how you can hate someone you're praying for, Yeah, okay, whatever. So we do it a few weeks, and we'd meet, and I'd pray for his wife and his family and blah, 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 all the different things. And then it'd be his turn to say, God bless the missionaries. It's just a real generic prayer. I could tell he just receiving. After a few weeks, he finally said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to pray. And so he stopped, and that's fine. And he ended up sometime later leaving the church, which oddly, the church started thriving after that happened. Little did I know some of the other things that were happening. But here's the deal. Paul is saying, as a Christian, if you ever find yourself in a heated disagreement with an older man, he was 20 years older, maybe 30 years older than me, right? You don't get to get in his face and fight back, even if he deserves it. And I'm not saying I'm perfect in anything. I'm not saying I didn't deserve anything. But in that context, I didn't get to. I don't have the permission to fight back in that setting. You don't get to call him an old cantankerous curmudgeon, even if he is one, right? You don't get to do any of that. You get to kindly dismiss yourself from that particular conversation and walk away and come back later when things have calmed down a little bit so that you can help improve the relationship. That's your job, even if he's blinded by whatever and doesn't see it. You don't rebuke an older man. Treat them with respect. So you don't berate him. You don't embarrass him. You don't verbally attack him. Thank him for his input. Calmly walk away. And if by chance he happens to have a heart attack a few months later because he's so full of rage and bitterness that his wife calls you and tells you you're not allowed to visit him in the hospital because you put him there, you let him do his thing and get on with your life, because honestly, that's on him. Because sometimes that may or may not happen in a situation like this. Don't rebuke an older man. Exhort him as a father. 2, treat younger men as brothers. Now, the great things about brothers is you do get to punch them in the face, right? I don't think that's what he means here. But you get to punch them in the face once in a while, and you're still brothers. Anybody here, you have brothers? I had 2 brothers growing up, and we would do all kinds of terrible things to each other. And we fought about everything. You just fight about stuff. You just do. That's part of being a brother, right? And you get to be a little more aggressive in your conversations. But in the end, you're still brothers. I mean, whatever happens, we're brothers. We could fight tooth and nail about, where the center line is in the car and who can't cross what, and who gets to touch the door handle of the hotel first if you're on vacation, or who has more fries than the other person in the Happy Meal. I mean, you could just fight about everything. But if someone comes against your brother, the 3 of us, we'd get together and it's you against us, and like it's us against the world. That's kind of how it is with brotherhood. Fight about everything, but you come together. One of the reasons that we do our Saturday morning breakfast every Saturday, because it could be like once a month or every 3 months, whatever. One of the goals of that is to get guys together because we need a brotherhood. We need to hang out together. We need to know each other. We need to know our strengths and our weaknesses. We need to laugh together, and we haven't had any fights yet. We'll work on that. We'll come up with some more controversial issues. But we need to just kind of get down and dirty and know each other, because we need someone who has our back at all times. Even if we disagree, even if we don't see eye to eye, we haven't even had a whole lot of that. But maybe because we're still in the polite stage. When we hit the brother stage, that we'll be able to be a little more aggressive toward one another and to say, okay, agree to disagree, love you, and go on our way. That's kind of how it works with brothers. So that's what we do on Saturday mornings. By the way, we're heading into a new topic this coming week, so come on out. If you haven't come at 8:30, you get a breakfast, and you get to hang out, and we get to talk, and we laugh, and we eat, and we get Chef Jim's famous breakfast cooking, so it's always a fun time. But that's part of what that is about. It's in growth, it's discipleship, it's learning about Jesus, it's learning about being a kingdom person, is also learning to be a brother, because you don't do that by just saying, hey, I see the back of your head on Sundays. I mean, it's through conversation and interacting together. So treat younger men as brothers. Now, remember, I'm older than some of you, so you have to be nice to me. But I'll bring that up once in a while in the future. The next one, number 3, treat older women as mothers. Treat older women as mothers. What if they're crabby, angry people? What if all they do is bicker and complain and have spew negativity all over the place? Again, there's no qualifier here. If they're older, you honor them. It doesn't mean you have to hang out with them every day. You don't have to sit down and have coffee with them every day and have tea every day, but you smile, you nod, you be respectful, and when things turn negative, say, I gotta go, and you go, wait, you treat them with respect, though. Just like the older men, you have a disagreement, you don't have to, hug each other every day, be best friends, but you do treat them respectfully. And you realize, whether it's an older man or an older woman, that something to always remember, they have been around longer than you. You may have a different education, or you may, maybe your teacher said you're smarter than your parents, you can push back. That's the big thing, the last 20 years. Guess what? You don't get to push back. You might know things they don't know, that's possible. You might disagree and see eye to eye, not see eye to eye, see differently on different things. You still respect them, you still listen to them, and treat them in a worthy manner. But they have lived longer than you, and there are things they know that you could never know because you haven't been around long enough to know them. Right? There is wisdom in our elderly people that you only get through wisdom. That you only get through living, through being around for a while. You just learn by doing life. Always remember that. Even if you're like, I totally disagree, you respect them and you think there's some nugget in there that I can definitely learn. Part of the great thing about our senior supper club that we started several years ago is we invite people from the community, Part of that, the expressed purpose of that is to honor those who are older than us. Those who are older women, those who are older men, to bring them in and say, and give them some dignity and give them some honor and say, we're just glad for you are still here. That you are in the realm of the senior citizen. Thanks for, it's not real hard. It's not like we're giving out awards to anybody. Hey, you're the neighbor of the week, so come on out. It's like, if you are a senior citizen, come on out, totally as an act of honor and respect to the older generation. So I love doing that. I love hanging out with them. I love interacting with them. And I know you all do too, because we have so many different people to help out with that every month. And it's just giving them purposefully a seat at the table to talk and laugh and serve and do all the fun stuff, have some good food together, celebrating them as older men, older women. The fourth one, instruction. Treat younger women as sisters. What's the last three words? With all purity. That ups the game, doesn't it? Right? They're not just sisters, like, oh, my sister in Christ, with all purity. No, treat them like they're really your sister. With all purity. If there's one place on earth where young women should feel safe, it should be hanging around Christian men. If there's one place on earth where young women should feel like they're not surrounded by people trying to get something out of them, it should be hanging around Christian men. Paul's telling Timothy to go into relationships with younger women, the conversations you have, just the relationships you have with younger women, even if you're single, right? You go into a relationship with the mindset that she is your sister. She is not a potential intimate encounter. She's not a notch on the belt. She's not another number in the game. Right? She's your sister. Now I know from experience that this mindset is effective. When you keep in mind, oh, she's just my sister. It's this huge information for young men to have, or old men, or whoever men with younger women, all right? You know how there's like regular people, like most of us, but just regular, hey, regular guy, right? Right? That's most of us. Then there's like attractive people that have really nice clothes and always look really nice, and their hair is perfect and everything. And then there's like this next stage, like gorgeous people that no matter what, that they're just, every physical feature about them is like a number 10. Everything's just, they could be rolling in the mud. You'd be like, ew, if it was me, but if somebody else would be like, oh, look at that. They're just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people, all right? It's one of those people, when they walk in the room, everybody notices, and when they leave the room, everybody knows they're gone. It's just a radar thing. You just know that, right? Well, I'm in my 20s, married with Cheryl, and we had one of those people who attended our church. She was also in her 20s. And one Sunday, she comes to me after church, and I got some Jesus questions. She didn't say it that way. I don't remember how she said it, but I got Jesus questions. Could you come over to my apartment and meet? And I go, well, sure, of course we do that. I'm a Jesus guy. You want to know about Jesus? This is a perfect opportunity. Absolutely, go on over there. Seemed fair enough, right? So I go to her apartment at the scheduled time that we had prepared and had in the calendars, and everybody knew it was happening. I knock on the door, and she opens the door, and she's wearing this extremely revealing, seductive lingerie. Do you call that an outfit? What do you call lingerie? This little piece of cloth stretched out on her body. And I'm taken aback for a moment, because I'm thinking, okay, gorgeous single woman, lingerie, private apartment. That's when like the red flags and warning bells, when a normal person would be going off, right? And I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? And I thought, well, she's my sister, so I guess it doesn't matter, right? So I went outside the apartment, assuming, well, maybe she forgot I was coming over. I mean, life gets complicated. Sometimes you don't look at your calendar. It was before smartphones. I don't know. Maybe she just simply forgot. And she'll probably run in the room and put some clothes on pretty soon. She didn't. She didn't. And when I asked if she remembered I was coming over, she said, oh, yeah, I knew you were coming over. And it made me kind of think, well, that's kind of weird. Why would my sister, who knows I'm coming over, be dressed like this? I mean, and honestly, that's just where my brain was. Like, this is just kind of awkward, kind of weird. But I figured maybe she's a little naive. Maybe she doesn't really know how life works, right? She doesn't understand it's inappropriate for sisters to hang out with brothers wearing something that you might expect on a wedding night, to be revealed on a wedding night type of thing. So I gave her a pass. That okay, we're here to talk about Jesus. I'm going to talk about Jesus and engaged in the conversation a little bit. And as we're talking, in the back of my mind is also rolling this verse in Timothy, and also there's a little verse in 1 Thessalonians 5:2 that at that point of the game I had memorized in the King James Version that says, abstain from all appearances of evil. So I'm to treat the younger women, she must have been a couple, 3 years younger, I don't remember, as a sister with purity, and don't even have the appearance of evil. Like don't show up to some single woman's apartment who's mostly naked and talk about Jesus. It's pretty clear. It's really, hello, pretty simple there. So we had, and that's going through my mind, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, maybe I should be backing out of the Jesus conversation, So we talk a little about Jesus, I answer a few questions. I said, well, let's do this again sometime, maybe at a Hy-Vee at the deli or something. We'll do, a little more public, that'd be great. And I back out, and I go home, and I immediately tell Cheryl, man, this thing just happened. Just so you know, I don't know, I'm just tell her what happened and how awkward it was. And life goes on, no encounter like that ever again with her, or really anyone else, which is great. And it's kind of funny, but really not, I guess, that I considered her to be kind of naive that day. I thought, oh, that poor girl, she doesn't get it, she doesn't understand, And it wasn't until decades later then I'm talking about this story on a radio program. It was probably when Vice President Pence, had the, I don't go, alone with a woman, blah, 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 in a car or nothing. And everybody was like, and so I was on this radio thing, and they're like, yeah, I remember a time, blah, blah, blah. And as I'm telling that story, decades later, saying it out loud, I'm thinking to myself, wow, who was the naive one in the story? Yeah, because you're all thinking, what are you doing? Great. You don't do that, right? And like the dots just start connecting as I'm telling that story live on the air. She knew I was coming over. She knew she was attractive. It wasn't like a shock that people treated her differently because of her attractiveness. She knew exactly. She picked out the outfit. It wasn't like, oh, this thing. She picked it out on purpose, and she knew that a lot of men would not turn down such an invitation. Probably never had in the past. I don't know her story in those way. What she didn't know was, as far as I was concerned, she was my sister, not a potential conquest. So it wasn't even, it was just awkward, not like, ooh, she must be wanting to do something. It was completely opposite than that. These verses, this advice, this instruction that Paul gave to Timothy some 2,000 years ago to treat younger women as sisters with purity saved me from potentially making an absolutely disastrous, huge mistake. Because I was so naive, I didn't even know what was happening there. And it saved my marriage from having to deal with an idiotic husband who would do such a stupid thing. It saved all that. These are good verses to have stored in your mind, in your soul. If you can train yourself to view younger women as sisters with all purity, you will honor the women around you. And there won't be some weird tension going on or weird side thought you're having and things like that. You will potentially save yourself and them from an awful lot of heartache and potential disastrous mistakes you could make. So yeah, we can't just fly over these verses. They're that important. And they're really simple. They're really simple. How do you treat people? Well, don't rebuke an older man, but exhort him as your father. Whatever's going on, you just do that. You treat younger men as brothers, your family. You treat older women as your mothers with honor and the respect they deserve. And you treat younger women as sisters with all purity. You do that, and I guarantee you, at least in the relationship world, you will have a good life ahead of you and a lot of great silly stories maybe too that you look back and say, what? But it will save you.